Let's be honest, kids today have it pretty good. They've got access to some pretty cool tech. They can just search up how to do their homework on Google or YouTube, and if they get bored, they can just jump on their Xbox or PlayStation and play for hours. But what did medieval children do all day? Well, join us as we look back in time to find out. Working at a young age was normal. A lot of children would start working when they were still very young. This was especially true if they lived and worked on a farm. The Industrial Revolution had not yet occurred, so farming was hard, laborious work. There was no such thing as a riding lawnmower, so everything had to be done by hand. Young boys would help their fathers plow fields and take care of crops. In addition to this, they would also tend to animals. Some examples of animals that they took care of include pigs, cows, sheep, and chickens. Girls would do different tasks than boys, but they also worked long hours. Their days would be spent taking care of household items such as clothes, cleaning the house, and cooking meals. If there were any sick people in the family, the girls would be responsible for taking care of them. Even though these chores seem easy today, remember that medieval technology was not advanced. For example, washing clothes by hand is not an easy task, especially considering that the water needed to be heated by hand as well. If you think about it, medieval children probably smelled pretty bad most of the time. Not only did they have to deal with doing lots of manual labor, but they also lived in unsanitary conditions. Waste would often pile up in the streets and diseases would spread very easily. On top of this, there were sometimes meat and other types of scraps left over from meals. These scraps would attract rats and other vermin, which would carry diseases. As you can see, life for medieval children was anything but easy. They had to grow up fast and take on adult-like responsibilities. They didn't really go to school. Unlike today, almost no children attended school. In fact, only 20% of medieval children received any kind of education. Most of them could barely read or write. Back then, the alphabet was mostly used for religious purposes. So if you weren't interested in being a priest, monk, or nun, there was little reason to learn how to read. However, even those who were educated did not have it easy. Medieval schools were terrible. They were overcrowded, and the teachers were usually unmotivated and underpaid. Oftentimes, the teacher's primary goal was to make sure that the children knew the Bible inside and out. So, if you wanted to learn anything else, you were mostly on your own. Still, there were some notable exceptions. Some wealthy families hired private tutors for their kids. In addition to teaching them basic subjects like reading, writing, and math, these tutors would also teach them about culture, music, and art. So, if you were born into a poor family, you were likely to receive little to no education. But if you were born into a rich family, you might become well-rounded and cultured. Sadly, this stark contrast between the classes has continued throughout history and persists to this day. If you're born into a poor family, you're less likely to get a quality education, which means you'll have less opportunities later in life. For entertainment, children would play games just like today. We don't think of medieval children as having a lot of fun, but the truth is that they played games similar to the ones we play today. They enjoyed hopscotch, tag, and hide and seek. They also invented new games. One example is a game called Tip Cat. This game is similar to modern-day baseball. Two teams would line up and take turns trying to hit a ball with a stick. The objective was to score more points than the other team. Another popular game was one called well dressing. In this game, players would try to throw stones into a well. If you think about it, this game is kind of dangerous since wells are usually deep, and the stones could fall into the well and never be recovered. Fortunately, nobody was ever seriously injured or died while playing this game. Of course, these games sound fun, and they probably were. But let's not forget that childhood back then lasted until the age of 14. After that, children were expected to start contributing to society through work. So even though they did play games, they didn't have much time to do so. Also, many of the games they played were violent. It was common for children to carry around wooden swords and fight each other. This was seen as good practice for when they had to fight in wars. Another popular activity among boys was hunting small animals such as rabbits. They would then kill the animal and eat it. They spent time with their family. Although medieval life was tough, the silver lining was that children spent a lot of time with their parents and siblings. Families were large and close-knit. Most of the time they ate together, worked together, and played together. However, this did have its downsides. You might be thinking, wow, how nice, but remember that medieval houses were filthy and didn't have proper ventilation. So if anyone in the family was sick, everyone was at risk of getting sick as well. Also, there was little privacy in these households. Usually, an entire family slept in one bed. And there were usually multiple families living in one house. Sometimes 3 generations of the same family lived together. This included grandparents, parents, and children. So, if you wanted to get away from your family and have some alone time, you couldn't even do that. They helped their parents produce goods. Remember that most medieval children had to start working at a very young age. But they weren't just doing chores. They were actually helping their parents produce goods. For example, if your father was a baker, you would help him bake bread. If your father was a tailor, you would help him make clothes. In some cases, these children produced goods for the entire village. This is why it's important to understand the difference between a chore and a job. A chore is something you do at home that does not earn money. A job, on the other hand, is something you do that produces a good or service and earns money. Both are important. But the point is that medieval children were not just doing chores. They were helping their parents produce goods that made them money. This is why they had to start working at such a young age. If you want your family to make money, you need to start working. No matter what time period you live in, it's a good idea to learn the skills of your parents. That way, you'll be able to help them. And, who knows, maybe you'll end up continuing their business one day. Some children were sold off. Unfortunately, some children were sold off by their parents. This happened most often when the family was extremely poor. If they couldn't afford to feed another mouth to feed, they would sell one of their children. Many children were also sold off to pay off debt. This is a sad part of history that we don't talk about enough. Just imagine how betrayed these children must have felt when they were sold off by their own parents. How would you feel if your parents sold you off to pay off debt, or because they didn't want to take care of you anymore? This is why it's important to help those in need. You never know what someone else is going through. And if you help someone today, they might end up helping you someday. Life was rough for most medieval children. It's easy to look back and think how horrible it must have been to live during the Middle Ages. And it's even easier to feel bad for medieval children. But remember that things weren't all bad. Yes, their lives were filled with hard work and poverty, but they also had the chance to spend time with their family and learn a trade. Just think about all the children in the world who don't have the opportunity to spend time with their family or learn a trade. In many ways, we have it much harder than medieval children. The biggest difference between then and now is that today we have so many distractions. We have TV, the internet, video games, and so many other things that keep us busy. In the Middle Ages, people didn't have these luxuries, so they had to find other ways to pass the time. What did you think? Was life better for medieval children, or is it better for children today? Let us know in the comments below. And, as always, thanks for watching.